Hello everyone, welcome to SSB Crack Exams. I am Brinda, your biology tutor. In this session, we will discuss the questions that has appeared in NDA 1 and 2 2020 from biology. So we will be discussing the biology questions now. I hope everybody have attempted it and written this exam well. But now let us discuss the questions that has appeared from biology. And the first question in front of you is: light enters the eye through a thin membrane called option A retina, option B cornea, option C pupil, option D iris. So what is the correct answer? It's option B cornea. So before that, let us look into the eye anatomy. In eye anatomy, what is the first part? That is cornea, right? So cornea is nothing but it is a thin membrane through which light enters the eye. So cornea is also a curved membrane and that covers the front portion of the eye. So when light hits the cornea, it enters the eye, passes through the lens and then reaches the retina. You will find another question also. You must be remembering. In the paper, you also find another question from eye anatomy which we will discuss. So the photosensitive or the light sensitive part of the eye is known as retina. It consists of light sensitive cells. So this is a direct answer, right? So what is a part of the eye, that is the thin membrane through which the light enters the eye, is nothing but the cornea. Clear? So let us now look into the next question. Question number 2. Which one of the following cell organelles may play a role in expelling excess water and waste in case of unicellular organisms? So what are the options? Option A lysosomes, option B vacuole, option C Golgi body, option D endoplasmic reticulum. So what is the correct answer here? It's option B vacuole. So in unicellular organisms. So what is a unicellular organism? Unicellular organism is nothing but single cell organism. So what are the examples of unicellular organism? Amoeba, right? A distorted figure, amoeba. So vacuoles in unicellular organisms, they absorb excess water and waste from a microorganism cell and excrete them into the environment by contracting. So nothing but I know you must all have seen the amoeba figure, right? Amoeba has a vacuole. This is nothing but contractile vacuole. This is a contractile vacuole, and this contractile vacuole, what does it do is it excess waste are excreted from the cell along with the excess water by this contractile vacuole. So mainly it is also helpful for osmoregulation. So when we talk about vacuoles in unicellular organism, this should be the example which should come into your mind. So vacuoles, they are mainly essential and they help in excreting excess of water. So here the answer would be vacuoles. I hope this was clear. Let us move on to the next question. Question number 3. Which one of the following terms describes the practice of growing two or more crops simultaneously on the same piece of land? So the options: option A crop rotation, option B mixed cropping, option C intercropping, option D mixed farming. So what is the answer here? Yes, option C intercropping. So what is intercropping? It is a part of multiple cropping. So what is multiple cropping? So multiple cropping in agriculture, it is a method of growing two or more crops in the same piece of land. So intercropping is a multiple cropping method which involves growing two or more crops together on the same piece of land. So what is the use of this? It gives us a better productive yield. So that is why this is followed. Clear? So which one of the following terms describes the practice of growing two or more crops simultaneously on the same piece of land? It is intercropping. Clear? Let us now move on to the next question. Question number 4. Which one of the following statements is correct about effects of antibiotics on viruses? Option A. Viruses are non-living entities but it can interact with antibiotics. Option B. Taking antibiotics cures viral infections. Option C. Viruses do not possess metabolic pathways on which antibiotics can function, whereas bacteria have such pathways. Option D, viruses are resistant to antibiotics. So what is the answer here? It's option C. Viruses do not possess metabolic pathways on which antibiotics can function, whereas bacteria have such pathways. I know this is a slightly tricky question, but still you can answer it. Why? Because there is a logic. Viruses here, they are not truly living. They're not considered truly living, right? So they're not living entities. They take the help of host to replicate. That is, they need a host for them to replicate. Okay, so that is why they are not considered as truly living. Now, viruses, they do not become resistant to antibiotics. Why do you think they do not become resistant to antibiotics? Is antibiotics, on the first hand, it is designed to fight against bacteria. Okay, so antibiotics fight against bacteria. This can cure bacterial infections, whereas it doesn't work on viruses. Otherwise, all viruses could be easily, eradicated or treated using antibiotics, but that is not true. It doesn't work like that. So antibiotics, it doesn't work against viruses. So this resistance thing doesn't come into play. Then that is why antibiotics, they cannot cure viral infections, but they are very effective against bacterial infections. So that is why viruses, they do not have metabolic pathways, whereas bacteria have such pathways. Now you got that? Let us move on to the next question. Question number 5. Which one of the following statements is not correct? Option A, biomass is a renewable source of energy. Option B, gobar gas is produced when cow dung, crop residues, vegetable waste, and sewage are allowed to decompose in the absence of oxygen. Option C, biogas generation reduces soil and water pollution. Option D, heating capacity of biogas is very low. So what is the answer here? It's option D. Heating capacity of biogas is very low. So what is the question? Which one of the following statements is not correct? You should be very careful with such statements. Which one of the following statements is not correct? So here, biomass is a renewable source of energy, which is correct, right? Gobar gas, we all know how is it produced. That is also correct. Biogas generation reduces soil and water pollution, which is also true. So talking about heating capacity of biogas, we cannot say it is very low. Why? Because specific heat capacity of biogas, it increases when methane concentration increases and vice versa. So that is why we cannot truly or pinpoint and say that heating capacity of biogas is very low. So that is why in this scenario, this is not right. Got it? Clear? Let us move on to the next question. Question number 6. In prokaryotic organisms, nuclear region is not surrounded by a membrane. This undefined nuclear region is known as option A, nucleic acid, option B, nucleoid, option C, nucleolus, option D, nucleosome. So what is the answer here? It's option B, nucleoid. This is a very direct question. In prokaryotic organisms, so prokaryotic organisms, if you talk about it, the first thing which should come into your mind is bacteria. Yes. So in bacteria, where is the genetic material? Yes, in the cytoplasm, it has a circular DNA that lies naked, right? The cell's undetected or undefined nuclear region is called as nucleoid, and this contains the genetic material. So the question here is, the nuclear region is not surrounded by a membrane, and this undefined nuclear region is called as nucleoid. I hope this was clear. Now let us move on to the next question. Question number 7. Which one of the following plant tissues has dead cells? Option A, epidermis. Option D, parenchyma. Option C, collenchyma. Option D, sclerenchyma. So what is the answer here? Yes, option D, sclerenchyma. This is also a direct question. So which one of the following plant tissues has dead cells? So sclerenchyma cells, they are the permanent tissues present in the plants and they have dead cells. Okay. And what is the function? They provide hardness and rigidity to the plants. So, which one of the following plant tissues has dead cells? It is sclerenchyma. Clear? Let us now move on to the next question. Question number 8. Cartilage is not found in option A larynx, option B nose, option C ear, option D urinary bladder. What is the answer? It's option D urinary bladder. So let us look into the options one by one. Larynx. Larynx is a cartilaginous skeleton, right? Nose. Just touch your nose, you can feel the cartilage. Ear. Ear also is a cartilaginous tissue, right? Organ. Ear is a cartilaginous organ. Then urinary bladder, it is a hollow organ. Okay. And it is stretchable. How is it stretchable? Because of epithelial tissue. So urinary bladder is lined with epithelial tissue but not cartilage. And this tissue helps greatly in stretching to absorb large volumes of urine. Clear? So cartilage is not found in urinary bladder. I hope this question was clear. Now let us move on to the next question. Question number 9. The part of the human eye on which the image is formed is option A pupil, option B cornea, option C retina, option D iris. We have discussed this, right? So what is the correct answer? It's option C retina. So via the clear cornea, the light reaches the eye, then passes through the aqueous humor, lens and vitreous humor where it eventually creates an image on the retina. So this is also a direct question where the part of the human eye on which the image is formed is retina. Okay, clear? Let us move on to the next question. Question number 10. Which one of the following is not a component of human male reproductive system? Option A cervix, option B urethra, option C seminal vesicle, option D vas deferens. So what is the answer here? It's option A cervix. If you would have studied the human male and female reproductive system and at least remembered the parts, then you would easily answer this, right? So cervix forms a part of female reproductive system and not male reproductive system, whereas all these three, they are part of human male reproductive system. So cervix is found in female reproductive system. That is why we find the cervical cancer and all cancer or related to cervix only in women, right? So here the correct answer is option A cervix. Let us move on to the next question. Question number 11. Which one of the following is not a reason of decrease in biodiversity? Option A large scale deforestation, option B exploitation of forest produce, option C maintaining sacred groves, option D encroachment in forest areas. So what is the answer here? Yes, option C maintaining sacred groves. So which one of the following is not a reason of decrease in biodiversity? So among all these options we need to choose that option which doesn't decrease the biodiversity. So large scale deforestation, yes, it causes biodiversity, that is we cannot conserve biodiversity, we cannot maintain the balance. Exploitation of forest produce, so whatever produce we get from forest, most of it we usually tend to exploit it. So that will also decrease the biodiversity. Talking about encroachment in forest areas, which will also decrease the biodiversity. So maintaining sacred groves. Sacred groves, they help in maintaining and preserving the rich and diverse biological wealth. It also helps in balancing the ecosystem, reduces the destruction of our habitat, and also increases the biodiversity. So the answer is option C, maintaining sacred groves. Clear? So the next question, question number 12. Which one of the following is not a cause of depletion in groundwater? Option A, afforestation. Option B, loss of forest. Option C, excessive pumping of groundwater. Option D, construction of large scale concrete buildings. So what is the answer here? Option A, afforestation. Here also, which one of the following is not a cause of depletion in groundwater? So groundwater depletion, what all causes the groundwater depletion? Yes, loss of forest definitely, excessive pumping of groundwater, and construction of large scale concrete buildings. So when there are a lot of buildings, obviously we need groundwater, so we tend to pump it, right, excessively. So excessive pumping of groundwater depletes the level of groundwater, and obviously this is a definite cause, that is loss of forest. So the only option here is afforestation. So afforestation helps in increasing groundwater levels as it keeps the ground moist, resulting in increasing groundwater level. So it also helps preventing soil erosion. So here the option is A, afforestation. Clear? Now let us move on to the next question. Question number 13. Which one of the following is the largest composition in biogas? Option A, carbon dioxide. Option B, methane. Option C, hydrogen. Option D, hydrogen sulfide. So what is the correct answer here? It's option B, methane. So we all know what is the composition of biogas, right? And among biogas, methane constitutes the largest. So biogas majorly comprises of methane, that is about 50 to 70%. We will find methane. So that is why biogas is highly inflammable. Apart from methane, there are other gases also, but biogas majorly comprises of methane. So that is why it is highly inflammable. So these are the questions you must have found in NDA exam paper. I hope most of you have attempted all of these. If you did not, then that is not at all a problem. This is just the beginning. You can learn much more, you can practice much more. Subscribe to SSB Crack Exam, visit our website, study more, get more knowledge and information. That is more important. Be positive, and this is not the end of the life. Even if it went wrong, that is okay, fine. Only thing, if you get it wrong, then that is a way of learning. Yes, then you learn something new. That is how it should be. So don't get disheartened even if it is wrong. I hope everything will be okay. Be positive, study well. Until next time, keep going.
Hello everyone, this is Vivod Dwivedi from SSB Crack Exams, and today we are here to discuss the chemistry questions of NDA 2 2020, which was held yesterday itself, that is on the 6th September 2020. And as per the honest analysis of the paper, the students of chemistry, those who prepared chemistry, were really lucky enough because the questions were very easy and they were picked up from the previous year defense examinations. So let's get started, everyone, with the first question here. The first question is, which one of the following is the largest composition of biogas? So we all know biogas consists of many gases which are used as a fuel, but the question here which is asking here is for the largest composition. So we have carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen, and hydrogen sulfide. So the correct answer for this question is methane. If you can see the composition here, methane can vary from 60 to 70% of the biogas, which is followed by the carbon dioxide. So please remember the second most contributor to the biogas as well, as it can be asked in the exams to come. Moving on to the next question, we have, which one of the following was the first mineral acid discovered? Now here they have given options like sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, and phosphoric acid. But the correct answer for the question is the first option, that is sulfuric acid. This was the first mineral acid discovered, and you should also know that sulfuric acid is also known as the king of all the acids. The chemical formula of sulfuric acid is H2SO4 with a molecular mass of 98 gram. Moving on to the next question. Which one of the following is the best example of desiccant? So we have silica gel, polystyrene, sodium chloride, and sodium carbonate. So out of all this, silica gel is the correct answer because silica gel has the capacity to absorb moisture and the water molecules on its surface. Thus, it can maintain a dry atmosphere, which is very important to ensure moisture-free atmosphere. And this is the reason why it is used in transformer as well. Moving on to the next question, we have which one of the following statements regarding bleaching powder and DDT is correct? So out of all this statement, the statement C, that is both contain chlorine, is the correct answer. Now let us look at their compositions here. So if you see, bleaching powder is nothing but calcium oxychloride. So you see chlorine here. Okay, and if you expand DDT, you have dichloro diphenyl trichloroethane. So this is the full form of DDT. So here also you find chlorine. So this is the only element which is common between the two as per the options given. So for us, the correct answer will be C option. It's very important to know their uses as well. Bleaching powder, it's a powerful oxidizing agent and it is usually used in the laundries. And when we come to the DDT, it's a known pesticide. Moving on to the next question. The question is, which one of the following is the correct sequence of changing colors when a turmeric stain on white cloth is scrubbed by soap and then washed with water? So here we need to understand that turmeric, which is basically a natural indicator, will turn reddish brown when it comes in contact with the base. So here the soap will act as a base. So obviously when it comes in contact with soapy thing, it will turn reddish brown. So the color change will be yellow, reddish brown, and it will be followed by yellow because when you wash it with water, that it goes away. Moving on to the next question. Number of water molecules of crystallization in copper sulfate, sodium carbonate, and gypsum are. We have 4 options here. Out of that, the first option is correct because if you look at the formula of copper sulfate, it has 5 molecules of water, right? And if you look at the formula of sodium carbonate, it has 10 molecules of water. Similarly, gypsum has 2 molecules of water. So this is nothing but the water of crystallization. It is the fixed amount of water molecules which are attached to a particular salt. And this question has been repeated in many defense examinations. Sometimes they take magnesium sulfate, sometimes they take copper sulfate. So the salt can change, but the questioning is the same, only they ask the questions about the number of water molecules attached. And you should also know that these water molecules only impart color to the crystal. Like copper sulfate dot 5H2O is blue because of the 5 water molecules attached to the copper sulfate. If we hit this, then the color will be lost and copper sulfate will be white again. So you can keep this also in the mind. Let's go to the next question now. At 70 degrees Celsius, sodium carbonate shows the property of gradually decomposing, which makes it usable in bakery products. The product of decomposition responsible for this use of sodium bicarbonate is. So basically, we all know sodium bicarbonate is nothing but the baking soda. And obviously, it's the carbon dioxide. It's the carbon dioxide which makes the cake fluffy because carbon dioxide, it's a gas, so it will rise upwards. And when it's rising upwards, it makes the cake spongy and fluffy. So basically, to convert baking soda into baking powder, we have to take a weak acid, okay, and we mix sodium bicarbonate in that, and we obtain carbon dioxide. So this particular carbon dioxide is responsible for making the cake or the bakery products fluffy. So the correct answer for this will be carbon dioxide. Moving on to the next question, we have in an incandescent electric bulb, the filament of bulb is made up of which metal? Now, friends, please understand that this is again the most frequent question which is asked by UPSC in many exams like CAPF, CDS, and the correct answer for this is tungsten. And obviously, there is one quality of tungsten that it has very high melting point. Apart from this, it has very high resistivity, so it does not burn easily at the room temperature. So it's the most preferred option for the electric bulb, right? And the symbol of tungsten is W from Wolfram. Moving on to the next question, we have, which one of the following element isotope is used in the treatment of cancer? So the correct answer for this question is cobalt 60, to be very particular. So you see that can be used for the treatment of cancer. So this time they have asked the isotope cobalt. Next time they can ask about uranium also, which is used in the nuclear reactors. They can also ask about this iodine, which is used to treatment in the goiter disease. So to treat goiter disease, we use iodine isotope. So these isotopes are very important. Now they have asked cobalt. Next time they can ask some other salt. So you have to prepare accordingly. Moving on to the next question. Atomic mass of an element is equal to the sum of number of. So the correct answer for this question will be number of protons and neutrons. So if you look at this element, so if X is your element, the upper part is always represented by the mass number and the lower part is represented by the atomic number with the symbol Z and mass number with the symbol A. So basically, mass number is nothing but the summation of protons and the neutrons. Protons are the positively charged fundamental particles and neutrons are the neutral charged particles, right? So when you sum them together, you get the mass number, which is represented by the symbol A. And similarly, they can ask you about the atomic number also. So atomic number is nothing but the number of electron or the number of proton in an atom. So these are the three subatomic particles. Next question is, which one of the following is the most fundamental characteristic of an element? So the options correct for this is B option, atomic number, because an element, two elements can have the same melting point, they can have the same color, even they can have the same atomic weight, but there is no chance for two elements in universe to have the same number of atomic number. So the correct answer for this question, the most fundamental characteristics of an atom or the element will be the atomic number, which is nothing but the number of electron or proton in a system. So that's why even the modern periodic table that we have, it is based on the elements arranged in the increasing order of their atomic number. So that's why it's very fundamental. Moving on to the next question, we have neutrons were discovered by. So here they're asking the name of the scientist involved behind the discovery of neutron. So that scientist is James Chadwick. He discovered neutrons. This British physicist discovered neutron in the year 1932, and he was also awarded Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 1935 for this discovery, right? And now let us see the other options which are given here. So Rutherford, if you remember, he has discovered the protons, okay, the positively charged particles. And J.J. Thomson, he discovered the first fundamental particle, that is electron. And John Dalton, this question also has been asked many times. John Dalton gave the atomic theory, which says that atom is indivisible. Moving on to the next question, we have, how many covalent bonds are present in chloropropane molecule having molecular mass C3H7HCl? So we have to count the number of covalent bonds. So first we'll have to draw the structure. So if you see the word here, it is writing prop. Prop means first we have to draw 3 carbon. So we have drawn 3 carbons here. And the next thing that we have to do is to attach chlorine. So we have attached chlorine also. Now we can complete the number of hydrogens here. Okay, so after completing the number of hydrogen, we have to count the number of bonds here. So let's start counting one by one. So this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, and the last 10. So see, we have 10 covalent bonds. So the correct answer for this will be 10. So you can see the answer here. There are 10 covalent bonds present in chloropropane. Moving on to the next question, we have which one of the following statement is not correct? So we have to identify the incorrect statement out of all the statements given here. So Buckminster fullerene is an allotrope of carbon. That's correct. So this option is correct. Next, diamond is a good conductor of electricity. So this point is wrong because diamond, if you see, if you look at the structure, diamond has no free electron so as to conduct electricity. Rather, it's a bad conductor of electricity. Moving on to the next question, we have vinegar is also known as ethanoic acid. So ethanoic acid is the correct answer for this. So 5 to 8% solution of acetic acid in water is called vinegar. Now the next question is the number of maximum electrons in n shell is. So basically you all know our atoms, they have got different shells based on the different energy levels. So you call it K shell, L shell, M shell, N shell. And the maximum number of electron is given in accordance with the Bohr-Bury scheme. They gave us the formula of 2n square, okay, where n is the number of shell. So basically for the n shell, the value of n will be 4, right? So when you put 4 there, right, so when you put 2 into 4 square, you get the answer 32 electrons. So for n shell, the maximum electron it can have is 32 electrons. Moving on to the next question, we have chalk and marble are different forms of. So basically we have to identify the compound by which chalk and marbles they are made up of. So the correct answer for this question is calcium carbonate. Yes, calcium carbonate has been found in chalk also, and it's there in the marble also, and you can also call it as the limestone. So friends, these all were the 17 chemistry questions which were asked in yesterday's examination. I hope you must have learned enough from them and you will gain enough clue with respect to the next NDA examination. I hope you will be in the learning process here. SSB Crack Exams has got the best and the most experienced faculties helping you throughout your preparation. So do visit our website, do enroll for the courses, download the app SSB Crack Exams, do your level best and come out with flying colors. Do subscribe the channel and keep learning. Thank you everyone. Stay blessed. Jai Hind.
Hello everyone and welcome to SSB Crack Exams. I'm Heman and now we are going to discuss about all the important physics questions that have appeared in the National Defense Academy or Naval Academy examination of 2020. Okay, so both NDA, NA1 and 2, both the important examinations had the same question paper and both the exams were conducted consolidatedly on 6th of September 2020. So among all of that important questions, there were 21 physics questions that have appeared in the GAT paper of the NDA. That means the second paper. In the part B, 21 questions were related to the physics. So in this particular section, I will be discussing with you about all the important physics questions along with their answers and the most important explanations, and wherever we find any numericals, we will solve all of them in a very detailed way. So stay tuned with this particular one. So without wasting any time, let us begin with the first and foremost question regarding the physics one. The first question says a liquid is kept in a glass beaker. Okay. So a liquid is kept in a glass beaker. Which one of the following statements is correct regarding the pressure exerted by the liquid column at the base of the beaker? Okay. So for example, this is a very important beaker, for example, and it is filled with some particular liquid. So he's asking, we have to find, let us take for example a point A in the base of the beaker, for example. Now what we have to see is that which among these statements is correct regarding the pressure exerted by the liquid column at the base of the beaker. That means here is the base of the beaker, somewhere here or somewhere here, wherever it can be, you can take somewhere at the base of the beaker. The main point is we have to see regarding the pressure that is exerted at this particular point of the beaker. And what are the statements that says? The first option says that pressure depends on the area of the base of the beaker. Okay, so here the beaker has its own area. So the first statement says that it depends on the area of the base of the beaker. The second statement says pressure depends on the height of the liquid column. Okay, so it depends on the height of the liquid column. And the third statement says that pressure does not depend on the density of the liquid. And the fourth option says that the pressure neither depends on the area of the base of the beaker nor on the height of the liquid column. So you have to always understand and remember pressure is equal to force exerted per unit area. Okay, so in a unit area the amount of force is acting, then the force that is acting in a unit area is known, it is called as a pressure. Now force area is a constant one. Okay, area is a constant one. So the more the force, the more the pressure. So in that particular case, it does not depend on the area of the base of the beaker. Remember, pressure does not depend on the area. And what does it say? Pressure does not depend on the density. No, it does depend upon the density of the liquid. Okay, the more denser the liquid, the more pressure it exerts. Okay, so the most densest liquid is a liquid metal mercury if we take into consideration. If you take the same mercury, for example, a same beaker, two same beakers are there, and both the beakers are filled up with the same height, but one beaker is filled up with water and the other beaker is filled up with mercury, then the beaker that is filled with mercury exerts a lot of weight. Okay, the main reason is because its molecular weight is also more. So whenever the molecular weight is more and the interatomic interactions are also more, then the density of the liquid will obviously rise. Okay, so pressure will depend on the density of the liquid. Okay, so we have to see that option statement A, option A is not correct, option C is also not correct, but option B is correct because it does depend on the height of the liquid column. For example, if you see, you can take for example the divers. Okay, the divers, if they go into deep into ocean and they are diving, the more deeper they dive, the more pressure will be exerted. Okay, and there was only one particular submarine, or there was only one particular vessel that was reached the most deepest point in the whole globe, that is the Mariana Trench in the whole of the ocean. So you can see that the more deeper you go down, the more pressure will be exerted, and that is a main phenomenon and situation that is used for building the submarines. Okay, so always you have to remember that this particular pressure that is exerted at the base of any particular beaker or whichever thing is there, the pressure exerted will depend upon the height of the liquid column. The more the water above it, the more weight and the more forces, more hydrostatic forces are applied at that particular point. Okay, so the option B is a correct one. We'll see option D. Option D says the pressure neither depends on the area of the base of the beaker nor on the height of the liquid column. Obviously, option D is also not correct. So the correct answer for this is option B. Let us understand and take into consideration about a very small and a very simple experiment. You can take a simple tube, okay, very transparent pipe, and in the transparent pipe you can fix a balloon in the bottom. Okay, you just attach a balloon in the bottom, and if you fill up with the water with half of that particular pipe, if you fill up with water, then the balloon will bulge out. The main reason is because whatever balloon is there in that particular pipe, the water will exert force in the internal walls of that particular balloon and the balloon will bulge out. The more water you fill up, the more the balloon will bulge out. This simply explains that pressure does depend on the height of the liquid column. Okay, so I hope that this explanation was helpful. Going through with the next important question was, which of the following statements is not correct regarding the travel of the sound waves? Okay, so we have to see that among all of these, one particular statement is not correct. Sound waves can travel through water. Yes, sound waves can travel through water. That is the main reason why the sonars and all are equipped in the submarines and all. We can also go with the second option, that sound waves can travel through air. Obviously, when I speak and if a person is standing in front of me, can clearly listen to it. And option C says sound waves can travel through steel. Yes, sound waves can travel through all type of solids. But option D says sound waves can travel through vacuum. No, sound waves cannot travel through vacuum. Sound waves can travel through liquid. They can travel through air. Okay, that means any gases, they can also travel through the solids, but they cannot travel through vacuum. The main reason is because there is no medium. It is compulsory for the sound waves to have a medium to pass on from one point to another point, but in vacuum there is no medium. That is the main reason why sound waves cannot travel. How can we prove that? We can go into consideration of a very simple experiment. If you remember, this experiment was there in our textbooks when we were studying in our schooling days. You can take a small bell, an electric bell, and if that electric bell, you can, if it is kept inside a inverted glass jar, and if that bell is rung, and if the air is present inside that particular one, you can clearly hear the sound of that particular bell. But if this particular air, if this in this glass jar is completely removed and a vacuum is created inside this, okay, vacuum is created, then even though the bell rings, no sound will be heard for you. Okay, that clearly explains that sound waves cannot travel through vacuum. Okay, so that is the reason why option D is not correct regarding the travel of the sound waves. Going through with the next important question is the correct relation between the radius of curvature R and the focal length of a spherical mirror is. Okay, so the relationship between radius of curvature R and focal length F of the mirror is R is equal to 2F. That is option B. Okay, always the focal length is twice as of the radius of curvature. This is the main principle of the lenses and all the important mirrors that we have to see. Okay, let it be a concave mirror or let it be a convex mirror, always R is equal to 2F. This is very, very important for us to know. Okay, Now going through with the next important question is, a lemon kept in water in a glass tumbler appears to be larger than its actual size. This is because of what? Is it because of reflection of light, or is it because of scattering of light, or is it because of refraction of light, or is it because of polarization of light? You can even see this. For example, you can take a simple glass tumbler, and if you fill it with water, okay, if that glass particular tumbler is filled with water and if a lemon is kept inside, and if you watch it from some particular point, the lemon will appear a little bit bigger. Okay, so why does it appear a little bit bigger? It is not only in the case of the lemon. Even if you take up a coin also will appear larger. Even if you take up a pencil or any particular pen, that also will appear larger the moment it entered the particular glass tumbler. The main reason of it showing this particular property is because of option C, the refraction of light. Okay, whenever light ray passes, it is passing from one particular medium to another particular medium. Here the medium is air, but here the medium is water. So when the medium is changing, the light also will travel in a different particular direction. The main reason is because of the interatomic distances. Okay, so light will travel in a different direction instead of the actual path. Okay, this should be the actual path, but it travels in a different way, and that is the reason why the lemon will appear a little bit bigger. And the phenomenon is the refraction of light. Okay, now going through with the next important question is, name the scientist who first used a glass prism to obtain a spectrum of sunlight. Okay, so we can even know about the glass prism, if you already remember, and if a white light ray is incident on it, it will undergo different refractions in it, and after that we can see the different amount of lights that are being spread out. Okay, so by this particular experiment we can see the spectrum of the light of the sunlight. So who was the first scientist who demonstrated this particular experiment? He was option C, Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was the first person to use a glass prism to obtain a spectrum of sunlight. Okay, going on with the next important question is, the cost of energy to operate an industrial refrigerator that consumes 5 kilowatts power working 10 hours per day for 30 days will be what? And it is also given that the charge per kilowatt hour of energy is equal to 4 rupees. So we have to be understanding this particular question in a very careful way, and it says that we have to find out the cost of energy. So what is the formula of energy? Energy is equal to power into time. Okay, energy is equal to what? Power into time. What is the power given? The power is given as 5 kilowatts of power. 5 kilowatts of power. And what is the time? It is 10 hours per day. 10 hours per day for 30 days. That means I'm again multiplying it by 30 days. So what will be the answer? So 5 into 10 into 30, which is equal to what? It will be 1500 kilowatt hours. Okay, so the energy that is consumed by this particular industrial refrigerator is, for 30 days, it is 1500 kilowatt hours. Now cost per kilowatt hour. For 1 kilowatt of hour, what is the cost? It is equal to 4 rupees. So what will be the cost? Cost per 1500 kilowatt hour equal to what? It is equal to 1500 into 4. And what is the answer? It would be 6000 rupees. Okay, 1500 into 4 is equal to what? It is 6000 rupees, and the correct answer for this is option B. Okay, so I hope that you understood this particular question and go through this explanation in a very detailed way, a very simple one. And this question is a very simple one. So going through with the next important question is, which one of the following statements regarding magnetic field is not correct? Okay, so all of these statements are related to the magnetic field. Okay, what does option A says? Option A says that magnetic field is a quantity that has direction and magnitude. Okay, so yes, it is obviously absolutely correct. Magnetic field does have direction and it does have magnitude. Going through with the next statement, it says that magnetic field lines are closed curves. Yes, always magnetic field lines are always closed curves. They are always closed curves. Okay, remember, magnetic field lines are always closed curves. But magnetic field lines are not open curves. So option C, statement C is wrong. And what does option D says? No two magnetic field lines are found to cross each other. And that is also correct. No two magnetic field lines will intersect each other. They will never cross each other. All magnetic lines are never intersecting. So option C is the correct answer for this particular one, that magnetic field lines are open curves. It is absolutely wrong. Magnetic field lines are always closed curves. Okay. Going through with the next important question is, two equal resistors are connected in parallel as shown. Okay. And a battery of 12 volts is connected across the combination. A DC current of 100 milliamps is flowing through this particular circuit, and we have to find out this particular value of R. Now what is this particular arrangement? R is connected to two resistors are connected in parallel. Okay, if they are connected in parallel, what is the formula? 1 by R equivalent is equal to 1 by R1 plus 1 by R2. This is the formula, right? So but here R1 and R2 are both R itself, no? So here 1 by R plus 1 by R, which is equal to what? It is equal to 2 by R. So if 1 by R equivalent is equal to 2 by R, that simply mentions that R equivalent is equal to R by 2. Okay, this is the equivalent resistance. What is the voltage given? Voltage given is equal to 12 volts. And what is the current given? Current given is equal to 100 milliamperes. So we have voltage, we have current, we have resistance. So we will also remember the Ohm's law. Okay, so from Ohm's law, what does Ohm's law says? V is equal to IR. So R equivalent is equal to V by I. We have the value of the current, we have the value of the voltage, and we also have the value of the R equivalent. So if you simply substitute all of them, you will get the answer as 240 ohms. Okay, so option B is the correct answer. Going through with the next important question is, which one of the following is not the unit of energy? Is it option A joule, or option B watt hour, or option B Newton meter, or option D kg meter per second square? And the correct answer for this is option D, that is kg meter per second square. Okay, joule is a unit of energy, watt hour is also a unit of energy, Newton meter is also a unit of energy, but kg meter per second square is not a unit of energy, it is a unit of force. Okay, so this is very, very important. Going through with the next important question is, two planets orbit the sun in circular orbits. Remember, they are circular orbits with their radii of orbits as R1 and R2. Okay, so R1 is R and R2 is equal to 4R. Okay, there is one circular orbit and there is another circular orbit, for example, for our own reference, and this is the center. So one planet is rotating in one circular orbit at a distance of R1, which is equal to R, but another planet is revolving around the sun. Sun is located somewhere here, okay, because it is located at the center. This one is R2. R2 is equal to what? 4R. Okay, so what is the ratio of their periods? Which is equal to T1 by T2. Now these are not elliptical orbits. When these are elliptical orbits, then we will take into consideration the planetary motions and all, but these are circular orbits, and it simply mentions that R1 by R2 is equal to T1 by T2. Very, very simple one. So R1 is what? R by 4R is equal to T1 by T2, and that is simply mentions that T1 by T2 is equal to 1 by 4. So option C is the correct answer for this particular question. Going through with the next important question is, a metallic wire having resistance of 20 ohms is cut into two equal parts in length. Okay, so what is the resistance that is given? R is equal to 20 ohms. This is cut into two equal parts in length. That means what is happening? If there is a resistance R, if the resistor R, this is cut into two important resistors. One is this one and another one is this one. But when it is cut into two equal parts, what is it? It is in a series combination. That is the main thing that you have to understand. Okay, it is impossible that you can cut the one particular resistor into two equal parts and that will be in a parallel combination. It is not possible. Okay, so now this R resistance R is divided into two resistances, R1 and R2. Okay, but both of these are in series, and this way this is cut into two equal parts. Now what will be the values of R1 and R2 when according to the series combination? R equivalent of series is equal to what? It is simply R1 plus R2. Okay, now but R1 and R2 are what? Two equal parts, so we will consider this both as R only. So what is it? Is equal to 2R. So what is R equivalent that is mentioned? The main R, that is 20 ohms, and from this particular one, 20 is equal to 2R. So each resistor's resistance is equal to 10 ohms. Okay, this is 10 ohms and this is also 10 ohms. With this, one part of the question is done. What is the next part of the question telling? These parts are then connected in parallel. That means these two resistances are now connected in parallel. So this is 10 ohms and this is also 10 ohms, and both of them are connected to the important battery. So it is connected in parallel. Now we have to find out the resistance of this parallel combination is equal to. What is the resistance? Parallel resistance R equivalent of parallel. 1 by R equivalent of parallel is equal to 1 by R1 plus 1 by R2. What is 1 by R1? 1 by R1 is 10 and R2 is also 10. 1 by 10 plus 1 by 10 is equal to 2 by 10, which is equal to 1 by 5. So R equivalent of this parallel combination is equal to 5 ohms. So the correct answer for this is option C, that is 5 ohms. Going through with the next important question is light of uniform intensity impinges perpendicularly on a totally reflecting surface. If the area of the surface is halved, the radiation force on it will become what? Okay, so this is a very important question that is being taken into consideration. So what is given? According to this particular one, there is an important light, and this is incident perpendicularly. It impinges perpendicularly on a totally reflecting surface. This is a totally reflecting surface. It is also reflecting back. Okay. Now, if this particular reflecting surface is halved, okay, if that particular area is halved, now what will happen to the radiation force? That we have to see. We have to find out what is the radiation force that is being mentioned here. According to the terminologies that they gave here, the radiation force, we have to remember the formula of the radiation force. Radiation force is equal to 2 into intensity of the light, okay, 2 into intensity of light divided by the speed of the light. Okay, so what is it? Radiation force F is equal to 2 into intensity of the light divided by the speed of the light. But we don't know what is the value of the intensity of the light. No, intensity of the light is equal to power into, what is the next important one? If we talk about the most important points, it is equal to power divided by the area. Okay, power divided by the area. Now from this particular formula, if we see very very carefully, where I is the intensity, P this particular is the power, and this is the area. Now what is happening? The area of this particular surface is halved. Okay, so when area of this particular surface is halved, what will happen to the intensity? Intensity will become double. Okay, why? Because I is equal to P by A, but A is now becoming A by 2. What will happen to I? New I will be what? It will be equal to 2 into I. Intensity will be twice. Now when intensity I will be twice, I will become 2I, means what is happening? This whole value will become double, no? Correct. So the correct answer for this is option A, double. Okay. So whenever a uniform intensity light will impinge on a perpendicularly totally reflecting surface, then what will happen? If the area of the surface is halved, then the radiation force will become double. Okay. This is what you have to understand and remember. Going through with the next important question is, consider the following image. This is the magnetic field. Okay. These are the lines of the magnetic field, and this is how the proton is going on. This is the motion of the proton. Okay. Now, what does the question say? A proton enters a magnetic field at right angles to it, as shown. The direction of the force acting upon the proton will be. Okay. So, direction of the force acting upon the proton, the force acting upon the proton will be out of the page. Okay. So, that you have to understand and remember, it will be out of the page. Going through with the next important question is, which one of the following statements about sound is not correct? The next important question says, which one of the following statements about sound is not correct? And the statements are, sound travels at a speed slower than the speed of light. Sound waves are transverse waves. Option C says that sound waves are longitudinal waves, and option D says that sound waves travel faster in moist air than in dry air. We will go through from down to top. Sound will travel faster in moist air than in dry air. That is because the moist air is of less denser than the dry air, and the main reason because of that is that the sound waves will travel faster in the moist air. Sound waves are, yes, they are longitudinal waves, but they are not transverse waves, but they travel at a slower than the speed of the light. So the correct answer for this is option B, which is not correct. Okay, option B statement is not correct. Sound waves are transverse waves. No, sound waves are longitudinal waves. When sound is produced, it has compressions and rarefactions that will reach our ears. Okay, so going through with the next important question is, when the short circuit condition occurs, the current in the circuit will become what? When short circuit condition occurs, will it become zero, or will it remain constant, or will it increase substantially, or will it keep on changing randomly? The correct answer for this is, it will increase substantially. To be more precise, when short circuit condition occurs, the current in the circuit will heavily increase. Okay, so the main reason we have to understand about the short circuit is that it is when there is a low resistance connection between two conductors that are supplying electrical power to a circuit. Okay, this particular situation will generate an excess of voltage streaming and cause excessive flow of current in the power source, and that is the main reason why the current in the circuit will increase substantially. Now what will happen? The electricity will flow through a short route, and thus this particular situation is known as a short circuit. Okay. Going through with the next important question is, which one of the following types of radiations have the smallest wavelength? Is it microwaves or infrared waves or visible light or X-rays? The correct answer for this is option D, X-rays. X-rays has the smallest wavelength, okay? The smallest wavelength, smaller one than X-rays are gamma rays. After X-rays come the ultraviolet light, then come infrared rays. In between you will have the visible spectrum. Then after infrared rays you will have the radar waves, microwaves, television waves and radio waves. So it is X-rays that have the smallest wavelength that you have to understand and remember. Going through with the next important question is, the instrument used for detecting the presence of an electric current in a circuit is. What is that particular instrument that detects the electric current? The instrument is galvanometer. Okay, galvanometer detects the presence of electric current in a circuit. Going through with the next important question is, the sun appears reddish during sunrise and sunset. The phenomenon in optics which is responsible for this appearance of the sun is what? Is it reflection or total internal reflection or scattering or interference? The correct answer for this is option C, scattering. Okay. Now, if you are an observer which is standing at one particular point and if the sun is overhead, what will happen? Whatever light is there from which is reaching from sun towards you, here the distance is extremely less, and that is why the less number of light is scattered and you can see the very bright sun. But if in case the sun is at the sunset or when is at the horizon or is in the position of sunrise or sunset, what will happen? It has to travel a lot of distance from you towards the point of the atmosphere, and that makes the light to get scattered and dissipated, and that makes the sun look reddish. Okay, so the correct answer for this is option C, scattering. Going through with the next important question is, a lens has a power of +2 diopter. Which of the following statements about the lens is true? Okay, what are the options that are given? The option that are given is, the lens is concave and has a focal length of 0.5 meter. Option B says that the lens is convex and has a focal length of 2 meter. Then option C says that the lens is convex and has a focal length of 0.5 meter, and option D says that the lens is concave and has a focal length of 2 meter. You have to understand that it is asking about the focal length. Okay, so focal length is equal to 1 by diopter. Okay, it is equal to 1 by diopter. So from this particular 1 by 2, which is equal to what? 0.5. So focal length is 0.5. But how can we say that the lens is convex or concave? The sign that is given here is the plus sign. Okay, so whenever the sign is plus, the lens is convex, and whenever the sign is minus, the lens is equal to concave. So here the lens is convex and it has a focal length of 0.5 meters. So the correct answer for this is option C. Option C is the correct answer. Going through with the next important question is, the refractive index of fused quartz is 1.46. Okay, so the refractive index of fused quartz is equal to 1.46, and that of the sapphire, okay, of the sapphire is equal to 1.77. If VQ is the speed of the light in quartz, okay, VQ is equal to speed of light in quartz, okay, and Vs is the speed of light in sapphire. Okay, so regarding both of these, which one of the following relations is correct? Here if we see very carefully, the refractive index of quartz is less than the refractive index of the sapphire. Okay, here if we go through, what is the main formula of this particular refractive index? Refractive index mu is equal to speed of light divided by the velocity. Okay, so what is the speed of light? It is mentioned as c, by the velocity is v. So what is v? V is equal to c by mu. Okay, whenever mu will increase, v will decrease. Okay, whenever mu will decrease, v will increase, and that simply mentions that. So whenever the refractive index, so if in this particular case, when the quartz has lesser refractive index than the sapphire, that simply mentions that the velocity will be more than the sapphire, and VQ is greater than Vs, and the correct answer for this is option A. More doubts regarding this particular questions, you can even always reach out to us, and you can even download our Android app from Google Play Store. Always stay safe, stay healthy. Jai Hind.
Hello everyone, welcome back to SSB Crack Exams. My name is Sakshi Sahu, and in this session we are going to discuss NDA 1 and 2 2020 paper, and we are going to discuss about the polity section, that what all were the questions from polity section that were asked in NDA 1 and 2 2020. So as you all know, the questions from polity section are always less as comparison to the other section. So here also in this particular paper, in 2020 paper, you will see only 5 questions from polity. So let's discuss these questions. Okay.
So let us start with the first question. The first question is, in the year 1928, a committee of Congress leaders drafted a constitution for India. The committee was headed by A. Mahatma Gandhi, B. T.B. Sapru, C. Motilal Nehru, and D. Jawaharlal Nehru. So in this question they are asking, in 1928, Congress formed a committee for drafting a constitution. So that was headed by which of the following? See, this is a tricky question because they are not asking about the drafting committee, constitution drafting committee. They are asking about the committee which was formed by Congress at time. So the correct answer will be Motilal Nehru ji. So if you know, in 1928, Britishers, they commissioned the Simon Commission, right? And the objective of Simon Commission was to re-examine and revisit the constitutional rules by which India was about to be governed, and the Simon Commission, it had no Indian members. For that, Congress decided to boycott, and in 1928 itself, all party conference convened by Congress party, they appointed a committee under the leadership of Pandit Motilal Nehru ji to draft Swaraj Constitution, and it is famously known as Nehru Report as well. So Nehru Committee, it worked from June to August 1928, drafted a constitution. This was the first attempt at making constitution, and which is famously known as Nehru Report. Nehru Report of 10th August 1928, it was a memorandum of appeal for new dominion status and a federal setup of the government for Constitution of India. It also proposed a joint electorates with reservation of seats for minorities in the legislature. Okay, so the correct answer will be Motilal Nehru. Now the next question is, which one of the following statements about Jaipal Singh is not correct? Which of the following statement about the Jaipal Singh is not correct? A. He was a member of Constituent Assembly. B. He founded Adivasi Mahasabha. C. He was the captain of first Indian national hockey team. And D. He campaigned for the separate state of Chhattisgarh. C. Mr. Jaipal Singh, he was a member of Constituent Assembly. Also, he founded Adivasi Mahasabha. And he was a first Indian in the national hockey team also. But he did not campaign for the separation of Chhattisgarh. Instead, he campaigned for the separation of Jharkhand state. So option D will be incorrect. Talking about Jaipal Singh Munda ji, he was a politician, writer, sportsman. He was a member of Constituent Assembly, also captained Indian field hockey team, right, in 1928. He became the president of Adivasi Mahasabha in 1939, and in 1940, in Ramgarh session, he discussed about the need to form the separate state for Jharkhand. Okay. Now, next question is, which one of the following directive principle was inserted by the Constitution 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976? A. The state shall minimize inequalities in income. B. Equal justice and free legal aid. C. Promotion of cooperative societies. And D. Provisions for early childhood care. So, as you should know that 42nd Constitutional Amendment, it is also known as mini constitution, right? Because of the number of amendment made under this particular Constitutional Amendment Act, and under that they have inserted few directive principles as well, and it was equal justice and free legal aid. Let me tell you more. See, under 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, directive principles of like Article 39A, Article 43A, Article 48A, they were added to the Constitution. Article 39A, it says about the equal justice and free legal aid. 43A talks about participation of workers in the management of industries, and 48A, protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding the forest and wildlife. These were added through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay. Next question is, according to the Article 79 of the Indian Constitution, which of the following are described as a part of Parliament of India? Parliament of India. First, the House of the People. Second, the Council of States. And third, the President of India. Which of the following collectively known as the Parliament of India? So the correct answer will be all the three statements are correct, because as per Article 79, the Council of Parliament of Union, it consists of President, two houses of the Parliament, the Council of State, which is Rajya Sabha, House of the People, which is Lok Sabha. All these three collectively called as a Parliament. Next question is, a common high court for two or more states can be established by. As we know, in India, a common high court can be established in 2 or more states, right? So it can be established by which of the following? A law passed by Parliament, B, an order of the Supreme Court of India, C, an order of the President of India, and D, an amendment to the Constitution. So the correct answer will be by a law passed by Parliament. Okay. So under Constitution, Parliament may by law, it can establish the common high courts for 2 or more states. Common high courts for 2 or more states, or for 2 states or more states, or any of the union territories. It is the Parliament which has power to form the High Court. So according to the Indian Constitution, Article 214 to 231, they deals with the provisions of the High Courts in India, and it provides for a separate High Courts for a separate state. But according to the 7th Constitutional Amendment Act, the same High Courts can be there for more than one state. So this was added in the 7th Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, it is also famously known for the State Reorganization Act. Okay, so these were all the questions from your polity section in your NDA 2020. I hope you got all these questions, and if you want to prepare well yourself for NDA examination, you can visit our website, you can enroll to our courses, and you can start preparing for the same. I wish you all the best. I'll see you in the next session. Till then, work hard. Jai Hind. Hello everyone, welcome back to SSB Crack Exams. My name is Sakshi, and we are going to discuss the NDA 1 and 2 2020 paper, and we are going to discuss the history portion, that what all were the questions from your history part in your NDA 1 and 2 2020. We are going to discuss all the questions here. So please stay tuned till the end. We are going to discuss every question. So let's start our session. So the first question in front of you is the principle that the framing of the new constitution for independent India should be primarily, though not solely, the responsibility of Indians themselves, was the first time conceded in A. Government of India Act 1935, August offer of Viceroy Lithgow, Cripps proposal, and Cabinet mission. See, read the lines carefully. The principle that the framing of the new constitution for independent India should be primarily, though not solely, the responsibility of India. For the very first time, it was introduced in which of the following? So the correct answer will be August offer. See, in order to secure the support of Indians in the Second World War, the Britishers for the first time, they announced in 1940 the August offer. Under that offer, they said the framing of the new constitution should be the primarily the responsibility of Indian themselves. Also, they offered to set up a body of representative for the principal elements in the national life in order to devise the framework of the constitution. But unfortunately, it did not mention how the body is going to be constituted. This created chaos. After that, Cripps mission came, right? After that, Cripps mission came, and it stated that the constitution should be the sole responsibility. Okay. That is why in the bracket they have written sole responsibility very carefully, right? So the correct answer will be August offer. Now the next question is, who among the following has organized 1904 a secret society of revolutionaries named Abhinav Bharat? Abhinav Bharat was organized by which of the following? Khudiram Bose, Shyam G. Krishna Verma, Hardayal V.D. Savarkar. Very easy and direct question. So the Abhinav Bharat was organized by V.D. Savarkar ji, and it was named after Abhinav Bharat Society, an organization which was founded by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar in 1904. The original organization believed in the armed rebellion and was responsible for the assassination of some officers of the ruling British government that time, and after that they were disbanded in 1952. Next question is, what was the consequence of permanent settlement on rural society in Bengal? What was the consequence of permanent settlement on rural society in Bengal? A. The Zamindar invested capital and enterprise to improve agriculture along lines of British yeoman farmers. Read the question very carefully. Second, a group of rich peasants known as Jotedars succeeded in consolidating their position in the villages. C. The riots prospered as a result of fixed revenue levied imposed on them. And D. The system of collectorate introduced by the company for exercising supervisory control on Zamindar failed to take off. So under this, you need to choose the correct option. So the correct answer will be A, a group of rich peasants known as Jotedas. They were succeeded in consolidating their position in the villages. Okay. See, the company, it had organized zamindar as important, but it wanted to control and regulate them as well. To subdue their authority and restrict their autonomy, the zamindar troops were abandoned, custom duties were abolished, and their clutcheries, their courts, brought under the supervision of collector appointed by the company. Now the next question is, what was the Damine Koh in Rajmahal area? A large area of land demarcated and declared to be land of the Santhals. B, the land of Paharis cultivated exclusively for paddy. C, the British territory marked for their military camps. And D, the land earmarked for locating settled agriculturists. So the correct answer for this will be a large area demarcated and declared to be the land of Santhals. Damine Koh, which is also referred as, it was a name given to the forested hilly areas of Rajmahal Hills in the Jharkhand state. It was the land of Santhals situated in the hills, and Britishers persuaded the Santhals to live in the foothills of Rajmahals by giving them those land. In 1932, a large part of land was demarcated as Damine Koh and was declared as the land of Santhals. Okay. Now the next question is, which one of the following statements about the revolt of 1857 is correct? This question is about the Sepoy Mutiny. A, it was a revolt carefully organized and planned by Rajas, Nababs and Talukdar. Very easy question it is. So you can easily eliminate the option. This is obviously incorrect. Option B, rumors and prophecies did not play any role in its outbreak and spread. So this is also incorrect because rumors were there. Option C, the rebel proclamation in 1957 repeatedly appealed to all the section of the population irrespective of their caste and creed. Here it is written all the section of the population. This was a major cause of the failure of the revolt of 1857. So this is also incorrect. Option D, the Britishers succeeded in quickly them and easily controlling the rebels. This is correct. Okay, Britishers easily succeeded, and after that they brought 1858 Act and they got the direct authority over India. See, the Indian Revolt of 1857, it was caused by political, economical and social, religious, military causes such as inequality in the salaries, benefits given to Indians, Britishers' counterparts, etc. The Britishers were, however, able to revolt due to the several reasons, and Britishers were, however, able to succeed because of the several reasons, and these reasons were because we failed to present all the section of the society. There was poor organization. Britishers, they have superior weapons, and there was lack of common cause in the rebellions. Okay, so these are the reasons. Next question is, where did Gandhiji initially forge the technique of Satyagraha? England, South Africa, North Africa, India. This is again a very easy question. Gandhiji first conceived the process of the technique of Satyagraha in South Africa in 1906 in the response of the law which was discriminating against the Asians. Okay, and that was passed by the British colonial government in the South Africa. And in India in 1974, first Satyagraha was Champaran Satyagraha. Now the next question is, who was the Viceroy of India at the time of Gandhiji's Dandi March? Lord Irwin, Lord Linlithgow, Lord Readings and Lord Wellington. So the correct answer is, again a very direct question, correct is Lord Irwin, because even before going to the march, Gandhiji first sent a letter in March to 1930 to inform the Viceroy Lord Irwin, and he informed that he and others would be breaking the salt laws in the 10 days. And then on March 12, 1930, Gandhiji set out from the ashram at Sabarmati with several followers on the trek of some 240 miles, and he went for the Dandi March, right? So it was Lord Irwin. If you know tenure of these viceroys, you can easily solve this question as well. Now the next question is, in which of the following years were the passenger trains introduced in the England? 1823, 25, 48, 61. Again a very direct question. So in the England, first passenger train was introduced in the year 1825. The first railroad built in the Great Britain, and it was to use the steam locomotives. So it was the first introduced in England in 1825. Now, the next question is the United Nations Charter was signed by 51 original members of the UN in 1945 at the A. Hague Conference, London Conference, San Francisco Conference, and Berlin Conference. So, the correct answer is it was San Francisco Conference, United Nations Conference on International Organization. It is commonly known as San Francisco Conference. It was a convention of delegates from 51 original 51 nations, allied nations, that it took place, and this conference took place on 25th April 1945 to 26 June 1945 in San Francisco, United States of America. Okay. Now the next question is, which one of the following was not a Panchsheel principle? This question is about the Panchsheel principle. You all must know in Panchsheel principle there are 5 principles. Okay, out of them, which of the following is not correct? A. Peaceful coexistence. B. Mutual respects of territorial integrity. C. Nuclear deterrence. And D. Non-interference in internal affairs. So the incorrect would be nuclear deterrence. Okay, this was not under the Panchsheel principle. Let me tell you what all are the 5 principles under the Treaty of Panchsheel. 1. Mutual respect of each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Okay. 2nd, mutual non-aggression. 3rd, mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs. 4th, equality and mutual benefits. And 5th, peaceful coexistence. This was signed between India and China. Okay. And the treaty named as Panchsheel principle. Now, the next question is, which one of the following American news magazines was highly skeptical of the Gandhi initially, but within a week completely changed its opinion and saluted him as a saint and statesman? Saturday Evening Post, Reader's Digest, Time, and Life. So it was the Time magazine of America, which completely changed its opinions. See, when we address the progress of Salt March from the American news magazines, Time, earlier it was deeply skeptical of the Gandhi's Salt March, and it claimed that Gandhiji sank the ground at the end of the second day's walking, and the magazine did not believe that amicated saint would be physically able to go much further. But within a week, it has changed its mind, because they were observing the mass popular following that the Gandhi march has garnered, and they then saluted Gandhiji as a saint and statesman who was using Christian act as a weapon against men and Christian beliefs. So this was the reason they later on started praising Gandhiji. So guys, this is all about the NDA 1-2 2020 paper, and I have discussed all the questions that they were there in the history portion. I hope you got all the questions. And if you want to prepare well more for history, you can always subscribe to our courses. So I'll see you in the next session. Till then, work hard, stay healthy. Jai Hind.
Hello everyone and welcome back to SSB Crack Exams. I am Chetan, and today in this session we are going to discuss about the NDA 1 and 2 2020 paper, and particularly in this session we are going to discuss about the question from the geography section. So let's start. And I shall tell you that in total in the examination around 20 questions were asked from the geography section, and we shall be discussing each of those questions with complete solution and answer in this session. So let's start. The first question is, New Zealand is considered part of which one of the following island groups? And your options are Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, or Hawaiian island chain. Now this question comes from the basic mapping of world. So this can be solved only when if you have thorough knowledge of how to map on the world map or the Indian map. So in this question, since this is a question which is related with New Zealand, a country which exists in the Australian continent, so this is related with mapping of the world, and the correct answer to this is actually Polynesia. Now what are these? Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. So these are a group of islands. So if you look at in the southwestern part of Pacific Ocean, around the border of Australia, near the Australian coast in this particular region, then you'll find that these are a group of islands. For example, Mariana Islands and Guam and Marshall Islands, they comprises of a nation called Micronesia, a region called Micronesia. Similarly, we have countries like Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and Solomon Islands. All of these comes under Melanesia. Similarly, we have another group of islands which form Polynesia. Now, this include Cook Islands and even New Zealand and French Polynesia. And New Zealand is one of the biggest country in this group of islands. So this belong to this region of Polynesia, and this is the correct answer. Moving on to our next question. Deen Dayal Port is located at, and your options are Kerala, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Goa. Now, this is again one of the question from the mapping of the location. And for example, in this case, we have Deen Dayal Port, and this can be categorized into two different categories. For example, the first one being the mapping of India. So all the major ports and all the major industries, you must know about those and their location. And also this comes under the study of coastal plains of India. So since Deen Dayal Port is located in Gujarat, actually it is situated in the Kandla Creek, and it is 90 kilometers away from that region, from the mouth of Gulf of Kutch. So it is located near the Gulf of Kutch, which is present in Gujarat. So the correct answer will be Gujarat. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following cities is associated with Biosafety Protocol to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which was signed in 2000? Now, you have options as Geneva, Nairobi, Cartagena, and Rio de Janeiro. The correct answer will be C, Cartagena. Now, why is it the correct answer? So, it was basically based upon the adoption of biosafety protocol. So, this was adopted by more than 130 countries back then in the year 2000 on January 29. And that happened in Montreal, which is present in Canada. It is also called as the Cartagena Protocol on the Biosafety to honor Colombia, which hosted the extraordinary conference of the parties in Cartagena in 1999. So the first conference was held in this place, Cartagena, and this led to the adoption of Biosafety Protocol in the year 2000. 1 year before, it was held in Cartagena, and to honor that, it is named as Cartagena Protocol as well. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you all. Now, moving on to our next question. Krishna Raj Dam or reservoir is developed on, and your options are River Krishna, River Tungabhadra, River Godavari, or River Kaveri. The correct answer for this is River Kaveri. The Krishna Raj Sagar Dam, which was built back in the year 1932, and it is built across the River Kaveri. It looks something like this, and this is near the city of Mysore and Mandya district in Karnataka. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following Indian states does not share international border with two or more countries? So we have given the name of states: Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Mizoram, and Tripura. And you have to tell which of these states does not share international border with two or more than two countries, or in short, in other way, we can also say that which of these countries share its international borders only with one country. So we'll answer this with the help of a map. So if you see Arunachal Pradesh, this is Arunachal Pradesh. It shares its international boundaries with Bhutan over here in this region, then China on the rest part, and then Myanmar on this part. So this is not true, because for Arunachal Pradesh, the number is 3. So this is not the right option. Then let's check it for Assam as well. Assam also shares its boundaries with Bangladesh over here, and then Bhutan over here, although it does not share any boundary with either with Myanmar or China, but still it shares its boundaries with two countries. Same for Mizoram. Mizoram shares its boundaries with Bangladesh over this side, and then Myanmar on the eastern side. So Mizoram is also one of the state which shares its boundary with more than two or more than two states. But Tripura is the only state among the mentioned state which shares its international boundaries only and only with Bangladesh. So this is the correct answer, and this will be the correct option, option D. Now let's move on to the next question. According to the Census of India 2011, which among the following is the least populated state in India? And you have given 4 states: Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Punjab. Now see, this is a completely factual based data based upon the Census of India 2011. So even the Census of India, even after 9 years, since it is the latest census that our country has, it is very important. You must be knowing each and every brief detail from the Census of India, the important ones. For example, the population, the list of population of the countries, the sorting that was based upon the area, the state having the largest area or the state having the smallest area. Similarly, population density, literacy rate, all these factors must be by heart to you. as far as the census of India is concerned. And if anyone has done the census of India in a very proper way, thorough way, then this question is a cakewalk for that particular person. So correct answer will be Punjab, as it has the population of only 27 lakhs 700 and only 2 crores 77 lakhs and 4,236 as per the census of 2011, and this is only among these following mentioned states. Okay, now moving on to our next question. The speakers of major Indian languages belong to how many language families? The correct answer for this is 4, as according to the website, if you go on the website of MHRD, then you'll see that on that website only it is mentioned that the Indian languages belong to 4 language families. The first one being Indo-European language, then Dravidian, then Mon-Khmer, and Sino-Tibetan language. Moving on to our next question. The Panama Canal opened in 1914, and you have to tell what does it link. There are options in the options. It is given that it links Red Sea or Mediterranean Sea, or Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean, or Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, or Adriatic Sea or the Black Sea. The correct answer to this is actually Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So it bridges a gap between the Pacific Ocean on the western side of the American continent and Atlantic Ocean on the eastern side of the American continent. And Panama is basically a country in the Central America, and somewhere over here you will find the Panama Canal, and it has been a huge engineering marvel ever since, and it has literally reduced all the costs that earlier used to take while shipping from Pacific to Atlantic, right? Now, moving on to our next question. Land revenue records maintained in India have categorized land use into. So this is again a factual based question, and this is typically from the static portion of geography from agricultural sector. So the correct answer to this is 9 categories. According to the land use categories in India, it has been land revenue records have been divided into 9 categories. Those categories I'll also tell you. So forests, land put to non-agricultural uses, barren and wasteland, then area under permanent pastures and grazing lands for cattle, of course, then area under miscellaneous tree crops and groves, which is not included in net sown area, then cultivable wasteland, current fallow or fallow other than the current fallow, and the last one is the net area which is sown or which is being cultivated. So these are all the categories among which, according to the land revenue records in India, it has been divided. Now moving on to our next question. Dry land farming in India is largely confined to the areas with rainfall less than. Again, this is a factual based question, and you need to have a thorough knowledge about the farming and the agricultural sector of geography. So as per the data, dryland farming, which is cultivation of crops in areas receiving rainfall above 750 mm or 75 centimeters. Since we know that 1 centimeter is equals to 10 mm. So according to the official data of government, any area which receives a rainfall more than 75 centimeter is known as the dry land farming. And if of course cultivation of crops is happening in that area. Correct answer will be option D. Moving on to our next question. For an area to be excluded from the drought prone category, what percentage of its gross cropped area should be under irrigation? Again, this is from agricultural sector. So most of the questions from Indian geography part has been asked from you can say the farming sector only and natural vegetation sector only. So let's check this also. The correct answer for this is option D, because in India, Irrigation Commission of India excluded the districts with assured net irrigation intensity of 30% or more from the list of drought prone districts, and this is as per the rules created by Irrigation Commission of India, which was established in 1972. I hope this is clear to you all. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following is not current of Pacific Ocean? And you have been given options as Oishio current, Alaska current, Agulhas current, or California current. So I'll explain you rather this. The correct answer is option C, but I'll explain you rather this with the help of a map which shows the entire all the major currents, warm and cold currents of the world. You can also find a detailed video on YouTube where you can find detailed lesson of ocean currents, and you'll understand each of these currents and the formation of it. But coming back to the question, Yes, so we had Oyashio current. Now, see, Oyashio current is this current which is found in Pacific Ocean. This region, remind you, is the region of Pacific Ocean, and you'll find Oyashio current, which is one of the cold current coming from the Arctic region, meeting the Kuroshio current near the coastal area of Japan, and this is a cold current which is found in Pacific Ocean. Then the second option that we had the uh, Alaska current. Now, Alaska current is this is the Alaska current. From here, you'll get a cold shoot of Alaska current, which is a minor current, and which is also a cold current, which is also found in the Pacific region. Now, apart from that, the third option that we had was California current. Now, California current is also one of the currents, cold currents, which you'll find on the western coast of United States of America, right? So this is also found in Pacific Ocean, but the Agulhas current, which is actually uh, a warm current which you will find in the Indian Ocean, and that too in the southern hemisphere. So the south equatorial current in Indian Ocean, it strikes the African plate, African continent, and it gets diverted towards the west wind drift or the southern current, and in the near the, of course, towards the Antarctica continent. And then you'll find the Agulhas current. This current, which is found on the south eastern coastal region of Africa, you'll find that current as warm current, and which is Agulhas current. So this is the current which is not found in Pacific Ocean, and instead it is found in the Indian Ocean. Correct answer will be option C. Moving on to our next question. The duration of monsoon in India extends for an average period of, you have options as 80 to 140 days, 100 to 120 days, 90 to 130 days, and 100 to 140 days. The correct answer for this is again very factual data, and this is completely based upon the climate of India and comes under the category of Indian geography. And this is very basic data. You don't even need too much of in-depth knowledge to solve this question. The correct answer will be Indian monsoon extends up to 100 to 120 days. The correct answer is option B. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following is the natural vegetation of Southeast China? Now, you have been given several options: subtropical broadleaf evergreen forest, tropical broadleaf evergreen forest, tropical deciduous forest, or temperate evergreen forest. Now, these are very basic data. And even if you are not aware about the vegetation or all around the world, you can simply answer these questions by checking the region of that which is mentioned in the question, and in on what latitude, approximate latitude, do they lie. So since this Southeast China region or the southern China region lies in above, of course, Tropic of Cancer, in the mid latitudinal region above Tropic of Cancer, and between the Arctic Circle. So this is the region where this region of South China lies, and also it lies on the eastern uh, eastern coast of China, and this coast of China has warm current. So definitely that will affect the forestation in such way that you will find temperate evergreen forest over that. Now, what are these? What are the features of these temperate evergreen forests? So these are located in the mid-latitudinal coastal region, and they are commonly found along the eastern margin of the continents. Since we are talking about Asian continent, China, and that too on the southeast China area, so that area will have the temperate evergreen forest. Now, some of the examples of the regions that have the temperate evergreen forest is Southeast USA, then South China, the question which is mentioned in the question, then Southeast Brazil. Then all of these regions, they comprise of both hard and softwood trees like oak, pine, eucalyptus, etc., which are found in the temperate evergreen forest only. So I hope this is clear to you all. Moving on to our next question. Which of the following is a cold local wind? This is again a very factual data based upon world weather system. The correct answer to this is option C, which is Mistral. So Mistral is a cold wind which is found in the region of French Alps, or in the France region of the Alps, which is found in, of course, European countries. And then all the other winds which has been mentioned, that is Santa Ana, Chinook, and Lu, these are all the local winds which are warm in nature. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following is a major environmental issue in Eastern Canada? So if you're updated with the current affairs all across the world related to the environmental issues, then you'll find out that in the Eastern Canada region, currently they have been suffering from huge amount of air pollution, which has led to acid precipitation or acid rain in some regions. Also, they have many other problems as well, but majorly air pollution is the major problem as of now. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following mountains lies between Caspian Sea and the Black Sea? Now, Caspian Sea and Black Sea is located in Asia, near the the western part of Asia, Central Asia. So the correct answer to this is Caucasus Mountain, which is also known as the Russian Caucasus mountain system, which is present in the region of Black Sea and Caspian Sea. Moving on to our next question. Bagalihar and Dulhasti and Salal. These are hydropower projects and they have been developed on which of the following rivers? Your options are Chenab and Jhelum River, Chenab and Indus River, Ravi River, and Chenab only. The correct answer to this is, of course, option D. All these three hydropower projects, for example, Dulhasti, which is a 390 megawatt hydroelectric power plant, which is present in Kishtwar district. This is also situated on Chenab. Then Baglihar Dam, which is also known as Baglihar Hydroelectric Power Project, is run-of-the-river power project, which is based upon the Chenab River in the Ramban district of Jammu and Kashmir. Then Salal Hydroelectric Project, which is also constructed on River Chenab in the district of Riaisi of Jammu and Kashmir. So these were all the power projects, which is of course based and developed upon only Chenab River. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following statements with regard to biosphere reserve are correct? You have been given three statements. The idea of biosphere reserve was initiated by UNESCO in 1973-74. The second statement says that there are 18 designated biosphere reserves in India. The third one says that all of those biosphere reserves of India have been included in the World Bank network of biosphere reserves of UNESCO. You have to tell which of these statements are actually true. The correct answer to this is only two, because actually the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, which was initiated by UNESCO, it was not in 1973. Instead, it happened in 1971. So the first statement is wrong over here. Then there are 18 designated biosphere reserves in India. This is entirely true. This is totally true. But out of these 18 designated biosphere reserves in India, only 11 biospheres are there which have been recognized by the UNESCO on World Network, and not all. So this makes statement 3 also the wrong one. So statement 1 is wrong, statement 3 is wrong, only statement 2 is correct. So option B will be the right answer. Moving on to our next question. Which one of the following countries does not have direct access to the sea or the ocean? Or in short, which of these countries is a landlocked country? So I'll explain you simply with the help of the map. So all these countries, Syria, Jordan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, all of these countries lie on the western coast or some in the central part of the Asia. So if you look closely, this part is Syria. So Syria Syria basically has a coastal boundary with the Mediterranean Sea. Similarly, at this point, you'll also find Jordan. So Jordan also shares coastal region with the Mediterranean Sea. Azerbaijan, which is a country which is present over here, this shares a coastal region in Caspian Sea. This is Caspian Sea. So it has a coastal region in Caspian Sea. But this country which I'm mentioning over here, this is Armenia, which does not share any coastal boundary with any of the sea or any of the ocean. And it is a totally landlocked country. So the correct answer will be option D, Armenia. Now, I hope this entire session was helpful for you and you got to know all about the questions which was asked in the recent NDA examination. Now, to learn all the basics which is required to answer all these questions, you can enroll to our course of SSB Crack Exams. For more details, you can definitely visit our website learn.ssbcrackexams.com. Till then, stay tuned to SSB Crack Exams. Thank you. Jai Hind. Hello everyone and welcome back to SSB Crack Exams. I am Chetan and in this session we are going to discuss about the economy questions which were asked in NDA 1 and 2 2020 paper. So let's start discussing all those questions one by one. Now, I shall tell you that in total there were 4 questions which were asked from economy section particularly, and we shall be discussing each of those questions with all complete solution. Now, let's start with the first question. Now, in the question we have which of the following statements with regard to Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana are correct. Now, you have been given 3 statements. PMKSY, in short for Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, was launched during 2015 and 16. Second statement says that the basic aim of PMKSY is to enhance physical access of water on farm. Then the third statement says that one of the main objectives of PMKSY is to achieve convergence of investments in irrigation at field level. Now you have to tell that which of these statements are true. Now, Factually, see, the first statement is definitely true, as indeed Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana was launched in the year 2015, so it can be accounted under the financial year of 2015 and 16. Then the basic aim of PMKSY is to enhance physical access of water on farm. This is also true. Even on the website of PMKSY, if you'll go, you'll find out that the main objective and the mission of this scheme was to provide access of water, and also promote water saving with the various kinds of water saving methods, so that there is prominent and sufficient access of water throughout the required time of farming. This was one of the statements which is also true. Now, one of the main objectives of PMKSY is to achieve convergence of investments in irrigation at the field level. This is also entirely true. So the correct answer for this will be option D, which says that all these three statements are true. Moving on to our next question. Yes, before we move on, let me also tell you that since this question was asked from one of the schemes of government, that is Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, and this is definitely related to the current affairs. There must be some news which would have been involved Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, and that is how the questions can be asked. That is, if in the recent news, if there is any scheme which has been talk of the town, or which has been in talk, or any recent update regarding any of the schemes, then that particular scheme becomes very important. And what in that scheme, the main objective of that scheme, when the scheme was launched, and what is the main purpose or mission of that scheme. All these three are very important aspects that you must know. Now, moving on to our next question. So out of those four questions, one question was the one which was based upon one of the schemes of government. Now, the other three questions, all those three questions was asked from 5-year plan. Even this question, the 5-year plan was first launched in. And the basically answer is USSR, as the 5-year plans were centralized and integrated national economic programs. The first such plan was implemented back in the Soviet Union in the year 1928. It was proposed by Joseph Stalin. Now, the thing that you must note over here is that 5-year plan is that subtopic of economy, and almost every other year you'll find at least one question from this topic. Although in this year you have there were 3 questions from this topic, and you would need at least in-depth knowledge of 5-year plan, this particular topic, to answer all the questions which involve these. I'll also tell you the trick to actually cover this entire topic in short. So this was the question. The next question that we have is this: call for Garibi Hatao was incorporated in 4th 5-year plan, 5th 5-year plan, 6th 5-year plan, or 7th 5-year plan. The correct answer is answer A, that is 4th 5-year plan. The basic objective of 4th 5-year plan was to growth with stability and progressive achievement of self-reliance, which was incorporated by the call of Garibi Hatao. Now, the last question that we are going to discuss is match the following type, which is also based upon 5-year plans. You were given a list of 2 lists. Basically, list 1, you will be having major objectives. List 2, you will be having the 5-year plans. You have faster and more inclusive growth in list A. List 1, option A. Then option B is faster, more inclusive growth and sustainable growth as well. Correction of disequilibrium, which was caused during World War II. Then attaining self-reliance. The correct match you have to make as per the options which are given, that is 1st, 5th, 11th, and 12th 5-year plan. Now, the correct answer to this is option B, 3, 4, 1, and 2. Now, see, we shall see each of these 5-year plans individually. Now, I'll also tell you the trick what you have to do to cover this all these 5-year plans. So, whenever you're covering 5-year plans, make sure that you go through each and every 5-year plan, right, starting from the first 5-year plan to the very recent one. Okay, and you must study and learn all the missions, all the objectives, and all the basic purpose. Why was that particular 5-year plan announced and came into existence? So all of that must be very clear, and also the time period when was it launched. That is also very important. So all these data must be you must be very thorough with all these data as far as 5-year plans is concerned. And in NDA examination, these topic, especially 5-year plan, is very important. 5-year plan or planning commission or planning commission and its components, all that topic is very important. Now let me tell you what first 5-year plan was. Now I'll be telling you the objectives of each of these so that you get a clear picture of what this question was all about. So the objective of first 5-year plan was rehabilitation of refugees, rapid agricultural development to achieve food self-sufficiency in the shortest possible time, and that also control of inflation. Now, since this was also the time of World War II, so there was also try of by the officials, of course, to manage the disequilibrium which was caused by the damages during World War II. Second one, we have fifth 5-year plan. This fifth 5-year plan had the mission of removal of poverty and attainment of self-reliance. Then the 11th 5-year plan said that rapid and inclusive growth must be there, empowerment through education and skill development, reduction of gender inequality and environmental sustainability. The 12th 5-year plan had certain changes, slight changes in the rapid and inclusive growth. So rapid and inclusive growth now became faster, sustainable and more inclusive growth. The purpose of a growth target of 8% was set, and raising agricultural output to 4% was also set. Manufacturing sector growth to 10% was also set, and apart from that, the target of adding over 88,000 megawatt of power generation capacity all across the country was also set. So these were the major objectives of each of these 5-year plans. For examination point of view, you must remember each of the objectives for all the 5-year plans. So I hope this session was helpful to you. In the next session, upcoming session, which I'll be discussing more about such questions, and to know and learn more in-depth knowledge about, to get more in-depth knowledge about the topic of economy, Indian economy, world economy, and the current affairs topics which are related with economy, you can subscribe and enroll to our course, which you can avail from SSB Crack Exams mobile application, and also you can visit for more details on our website ssbcrackexams.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned to SSB Crack Exams till the next session. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Hello everyone and welcome to SSB Crack Exams. I'm Hemant and now we are going to discuss about the questions that have appeared in the NDA NA 1 and 2 2020 question paper of the topics of the general knowledge and the defense specific related ones. Please remember, I will be covering only those questions that have appeared in NDA NA 1 and 2 2020 of the general knowledge and the defense specific related questions. And we already know that both NDA NA 1 and NDA NA 2 of 2020 have been conducted on the same day, that both of the exams have the same question paper, and the exam was conducted on 6th of September 2020. So we have done a complete analysis regarding that, and we came to a conclusion that there are around 7 important general knowledge questions and 3 important defense specific questions, and in the whole there are 10 questions that are related towards the general knowledge and the defense specific related ones in the whole of the NDA NA 2020 question paper. So without wasting any time, let us begin with each and every particular question and the answers of all of these. Okay, so beginning with the first and foremost question is, what is Tikki Mausi in the context of malnutrition? I repeat the question, what is Tikki Mausi in the context of malnutrition? And the options are given as, is it a specially packaged food item, or is it a mascot, or is it the name of a scheme, or is it a name given to the healthcare providers? So Tikki Mausi is simply a mascot. Okay, this is how Tikki Mausi looks. Okay, so what is this actually? If we go through the details regarding that particular, with an aim to spread awareness about child and women's nutrition, women and child development, please remember, women and child development department of our own country, and the Mission Shakti department, both of these in collaboration with the UNICEF have unveiled a mascot named Tikki Mausi. The mascot has been named as Tikki Mausi in reference to the second mother of a child. It is projected to spread awareness for better health care of children and their development. This was done in the state of Odisha. So this is a very important update at that particular time. So this is a very important update for us. Okay, so Tikki Mausi is that particular one. It is an important mascot which is unveiled in collaboration to spread, with an aim to spread the awareness about the child and women's nutrition, and it is done by the Women and Child Development and Mission Shakti department, and along with the collaboration with the United Nations International Children's Education Fund, so UNICEF. Both of them have collaborated together and they have unveiled this particular mascot. The main aim of this mascot is that to spread awareness about the child and women's nutrition. Okay, so she is named as Tikki Mausi. Tikki Mausi means the second mother of a child. Okay, so the next question that was asked in this particular question paper was, which of the following was the theme of the World Tourism Day 2019? So what is the theme of the World Tourism Day 2019? Is it A, sustainable tourism, or tourism and the digital transformation, or tourism responding to the challenge of climate change, or tourism and jobs, a better future for all? And the correct answer for this is option D, tourism and jobs, a better future for all. Okay, so the theme for the World Tourism Day 2019 is tourism and jobs, a better future for all. This was unveiled by the WTO's overarching focus on skills, education and jobs throughout the year, and this particular World Tourism Day will be a celebration on the topic tourism and jobs, a better future for all. Tourism can help us build a better future for everyone. Okay, so this particular context was taken into consideration regarding the changes that are being going on regarding the environmental and the ecological and economical balances of each and every other country. So all the important countries of the globe are following, and they are keeping their future targets on making the environmental future secure and on keeping the medical future also secure. So World Tourism Day is also a good sort of notification that tourism can be a very good source of income, and by means of tourism we can also maintain the ecological balance of our own country. So going on with the next important question that was asked was, which of the following countries has hosted the army exercise TSENTR 2019? So this is regarding the defense specific related question. So which among these is that particular country that hosts the army exercise TSENTR 2019? Is it Russia or China or Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan? The correct answer for this is option A, Russia. Okay, Russia hosts the TSENTR 2019. The speciality of this particular exercise TSENTR 2019 is that both the armies of India and Pakistan took part in this particular exercise. This was conducted in 2019 from September of 9th to the 23rd of September. Okay, so this is held by Russia, and it is done every year at one of its 4 military commands, which include Eastern Military Command at Vostok, the Western Military Command of Russia at Zapad, the Central Military Command at TSENTR, and the Southern Military Command at Kavkaz. Okay, so it rotates through 4 main Russian operational strategic commands, and the main speciality of this exercise of the year of 2019 is that both the armies of India and Pakistan have participated in this. Going on with the next important question that was asked is, which of the following countries is called the country of winds? I'll repeat the question. Which among these countries is called as the country of winds? Is it India or China or Denmark or Germany? The correct answer for this is option C, Denmark. Denmark is called as the country of winds. The main reason is not just because that it has a lot of winds going on there. The main reason is because it has the highest proportion of wind power in the world. Okay, so the highest proportion of wind power in the world is there in this particular country, which is Denmark, and that is the reason why Denmark is called as the country of winds. Going through with the next important question that was asked is, which of the following is the oldest scientific department of the government of India? I repeat the question. Which of the following is the oldest scientific department of the government of India? Is it Department of Biotechnology, or Survey of India, or India Meteorological Department, or the Defense Research and Development Organization? The correct answer for this is option A, Survey of India. Survey of India is the oldest, completely oldest, and the first and foremost scientific department of the government of India. If you go through the establishment dates, the Survey of India was established on 1767, whereas the Department of Biotechnology was established on 1986. India Meteorological Department was established on 1875, and DRDO was established in 1958. Okay, so through this particular information, it is clear that Survey of India is the oldest scientific department of the government of India. Going through with the next important question is, Nasim Al Bar is a bilateral naval exercise between India and which particular country? So Nasim Al Bar is a bilateral naval exercise between India and Oman. Okay, remember, this is a bilateral naval exercise between India and Oman. Why is it very important? Oman is extremely important for our country India. This is the main reason is because Oman is located in a very strategic location. This country is at the gateway of the Strait of Hormuz, through which India imports 1/5 of its oil imports. Okay, so 1/5 of the oil imports are coming from the Strait of Hormuz, and it is at this particular gateway of the Strait of Hormuz we have Oman. So India and Oman both should have a proper understanding, and having a good relationship with all those countries wherein which we get the trade relationship is a very good and a boosting aspect for our own country. So on January of 6th of 2020, 2 Oman ships have arrived in Goa to participate in this Indo-Oman bilateral naval exercise. The Indian ships that have participated in this exercise, they include INS Subhadra and INS Bias. Okay, so that is it regarding this particular important question. Going through with the next question that was asked in this particular question paper was, Koneru Hampi excels in which one of the following sports? I repeat the question. Koneru Hampi excels in which one of the following sports? Is it boxing or table tennis or chess or billiards? So Koneru Hampi is a chess champion. Okay, she is an Indian chess player who is also running as the world rapid champion. In the year of 2002, she became the youngest woman ever to achieve the title of Grandmaster at the age of 15 years, 1 month, 27 days. Okay, so she became the first youngest woman ever to achieve the title of the Grandmaster in chess at the age of 15 years, 1 month, 27 days, and she is an Indian chess player. Remember, she is Koneru Hampi. Going through with the next important question that was asked is, which one of the following was the official mascot of Khelo India Youth Games 2020? So which among these is the official mascot of Khelo India Youth Games 2020? And the correct answer for this is option A, Vijaya. Okay, Vijaya and Jaya are 2 important mascots of the Khelo India Youth Games 2020. So the 3rd edition of it was conducted from 10th of January 2020 to 22nd of January 2020. Remember the dates, they are conducted from 10th of January 2020 to 22nd of January 2020. This is the 3rd edition of the Khelo India Youth Games. The official mascot Vijaya was also taken for a city tour across Guwahati for the local audience of interaction during those days. Okay, so going through the next important question that was asked is, in January 2020, a passenger aircraft crashed in Iran soon after taking off from Tehran's Imam Khomeini Airport, killing about 170 people on board. The airplane belongs to what? I repeat the question. In January of 2020, a passenger aircraft crashed in Iran soon after taking off from Tehran's Imam Khomeini Airport, killing about 170 people on board. So what does this particular airplane, which particular airways does it belong to? Is it A, Qatar Airways, or does it belong to Ukraine International Airlines, or does it belong to Singapore Airlines, or does it belong to the Cathay Pacific? The correct answer for this is option B, Ukraine International Airlines. Ukrainian plane has crashed over the southwestern outskirts of Tehran. Tehran is the capital of Iran. So it was at the southwestern outskirts of this particular Tehran after taking off from Tehran's Imam Khomeini International Airport hours after Iran's missile attack on US base in Iraq on Wednesday of January of 8th of 2020. And the next important question is that Milan, a multilateral naval exercise 2020 was hosted by which one of the following cities? Milan is an important multilateral naval exercise which is hosted by our own country, India. So the 2020th edition of Milan, the 2020 year's edition of Milan was hosted by which of the following cities? Was it hosted at Port Blair or Kochi or Vishakhapatnam or Panaji? The correct answer for this is option C, Vishakhapatnam. Okay, it is to be scheduled to be held from 18th to 28th of March 2020, but it is postponed. That means it was not at all conducted, but it will be conducted very soon, and it is held under the aegis of Eastern Naval Command. Over 40 countries are expected to participate in the exercise. Okay, so that is it regarding all the important 10 most important questions of the general knowledge and the defense specific related ones in the NDA NA 2020 question paper. I hope that this particular session was of very much help to you, and if in case you have any more doubts regarding this particular question paper and any other important inputs regarding the examination and the subject knowledge that you need, you can always go through our SSB Crack Exams learning app. You can also go through our website, which is learn.ssbcrackexams.com. Always stay safe, stay healthy. Jai Hind.